I am Dr. Melanie Buttle, and I am the principal of Peter Gzowski College. Great to see all your faces. We generally go till about 5 o'clock with these talks, and that's sort of our time, our window. And if you need to leave before we're quite finished, sometimes we have a great gab at the end. You can always exit and sort of say goodbye to us in the chat if you need to. So I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement for us. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations, and may we honor those teachings. Miigwech. And again, thanks everybody for joining us. And I am going to ask Stephanie, our college assistant in Gzowski College, to introduce our guest this week.
Thanks, Mel. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we have the pleasure of having Rosemary with us, Rosemary Ganley. And Rosemary is a Peterborough resident, a lifelong feminist, activist, and writer. She attended the 4th UN Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995. Rosemary has lived in Jamaica and Tanzania with her husband, John, founded the development agency Jamaica Self-Help in 1980. In 2016, she published a book on this experience, Jamaica Journal, the story of a grassroots Canadian aid organization. And in 2011, Rosemary gave the Margaret Lawrence Lecture at Trent on feminist theologies, and now writes a weekly column for the Peterborough Examiner. Her writing has appeared in the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star, the Peterborough Examiner, the Green Teacher, and the Conscience magazine. She was inducted into the Peterborough Pathway of Fame in 2011 and received the YMCA Peace Medal in 2018. Also in 2018, she served on Prime Minister Trudeau's 19-person Gender Equality Advisory Council for the G7 meetings in Quebec. Welcome, Rosemary. We're so glad you came to join us.
I'm excited to be here too. I'm not very technical, but this is like share screen and stuff like that. But I want to show you an African bird. It's called the Sankofa, Sankofa. And it was introduced to me this week. I was working on a webinar. It was called Feminist Forum. I mean, I've never organized a meeting more than 20 people, but this feminist forum drew 1,000 registrants because we had this fantastic group of Canadian women change agents, largely young. But anyway, Jean Augustine, the Honorable Jean Augustine, the first Black Canadian to serve in the House of Commons, was one of our panelists. I think she's saying yes to everything. This is the 25th anniversary after Beijing. And she brought this bird to show, and I just said to my sons, this is my next birthday gift, get me some earrings. It's a mythic African bird of a bird that is moving forward by looking back and holds in her beak an egg. So that was really, really reassuring for those of us. And I'm here today to lay out my life, but to get you to pick it over. And there's so many people on this call, Tanya Krantz, who know my life, so I won't be able to obfuscate at all. But I really, you know, once I was teaching a grade 11 English class and my own son was in the class. It was one semester. And at the end of the semester, I said, so Jim, how did your colleagues like my class? He said, well, Mother, they found you very interesting, but they never knew where you were going to land. And honestly, I don't know where I'm going to land either. But Trent has, but I would really love you to just wave your hand if you want me to expand on a point. You know, the favor you've done me is like this bird. I've gone back over my life and I'm in my 80s. And what can I do now is reassure my colleagues who are in my age range and suggest a few pickings for younger. And so stop me At any point, I grew up, I am comfortable at the grassroots. The day that the Prime Minister called me at 6 o'clock and said, would you serve on the gender, I want to raise feminism to a higher profile in the G7 countries. And would you serve on this 19-woman advisory, one-man advisory council? And I said, I wanted to keep him on the phone, of course. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, what do you want from me? And he said, your voice, your experience, and your grassroots connections. And that's where I'm most comfortable in this middle-sized town, writing for this local newspaper. There's only 75 dailies left in the country. I mean, print media is in trouble, and the Examiner keeps going. And I'm glad to participate. I keep asking for a raise, and they say next quarter maybe. But the privilege is that I can pick the topics, and it's largely, well, the editor says, I never know what's going to come in from you, but the topics are mostly good news, and they're mostly Peterborough based. I got some global views too. And just this week, I said I'd talk about developing and keeping a global consciousness. This week, I was on a Zoom call with Amnesty Local Group, Group 46, 35 years old. And some of the original members are still in it, like Connie Perry. And they were meeting, and an appeal came from a filmmaker who's associated with Trent. His name is James Cullingham. And I said, how much have we got in the budget? And they said $174. Like, this is typical of grassroots groups. So I said, I move that we give James Cullingham $100 for this project. Because he said no amount's too small. So we did that. Now, what is James Cullingham? He's a Trent grad. He's an adjunct professor for you. He has moved back to Peterborough for the quality of life that we largely enjoy in this size. And he was struck with the fate of 3 journalists who were being threatened in their country for telling the truth, in Syria, in Turkey, and in Mexico. And so he wants to do, and he's largely done it, an hour-long documentary. They have all refugee status in Toronto, you'll be glad to know. And 1 is a woman and 2 are men. And he has got a lot of footage about the threats they were under, their desire to be reunited with their loved ones, and to seek Canadian citizenship. So, I mean, just by being with a local group like Amnesty on Monday night, I get an idea for a story. I call James Cullingham. He tells me how happy he is to be back, because he's a Trentoid. That's the expression we use. Did you know that expression? You're Trentoids once you graduate, and you circle back here. Now, I grew up in a small Northern Ontario mining town. It was either boom or bust. My brothers worked underground in a gold mine for $11 a shift. And at risk too. And whenever there was an explosion underground, everybody rushed to the mine gates. There is at last in Kirkland Lake, there is a miners' monument marking the deaths of 100 miners in a 30-year period in rock slides and so on. So, and it was, Kirkland Lake was multicultural before it was chic to be multicultural. What I mean is the miners were Poles and Ukrainians and Italians. And we had one high school, and we had a lot, and my colleagues in high school were striving for the sake of their families. So I had good intellectual competition, and then I went on to the University of Toronto. And but my father had said to us 4 kids, he was a feminist without the word. He had 2 boys and 2 girls. He said you should all have equal opportunity, but I don't know how I can afford it if you all go off to Toronto. But he said to us, always advocate for somebody you are not. That stayed with me. If you're old, advocate for the young. If you're white, advocate for people of color. If you're straight, advocate for sexual diversities, and so on. So I carried that with me, and then went to Toronto, and full of youthful idealism. I met John at a college conference. We were college students. He was from Loyola in Montreal. I was from the University of Toronto. And we were going to change the world, along with students from the East Coast and St. Paul's in Winnipeg and so on. So I still have that ambition to change the world. But always to circle back to the grassroots and for friendship and for to be in touch with realities. Now, I'm going to stop there. Anything you want to mention about education or childhood? It was a good marriage. And I've got to tell a story on Madam Minister, because she's here. One evening, I don't know, it would be 15 years ago, John said, I want to know more about Islam. So I'm going to the Eid dinner at Trent. And I said, I'm too tired, you go. And he came back and he said, I met this fantastic young woman selling red scarves for Afghanistan. So I bought 10. I said, John, what are we going to do with 10? He said, well, there's your sister and my sister. And so anyway, Miriam and John were firm friends from then. And that's really been a blessing, a real blessing. And now, what did I study in university? I studied philosophy and English. That's a good background. I mean, Dr. Buttle, history is a good background too. But philosophy, they were the big questions. Philosophy tried to answer the questions: what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful. And I'm not very good with practical things, but I love metaphysics. I love being in those discussions. I still do. Well, then we were married in 1961, and we had an early bereavement. So of a child who took sick in Montreal in 1966, and it was a short illness, and she died. And that was a terrible time. So I experienced being surrounded by community. I think our friends didn't leave us alone for a month, one night. They didn't leave us alone for one night. They brought drinks, I took them all. They brought pills, I took them all, and got through. But and now in Peterborough, do you know the Butterfly Garden? It's down in Millennium Park. There's another, Peterborough is full of little circles, powerful little circles of Peterborough. They don't want any publicity, but they got the city to give them some choice land in Millennium Park, and they have bronze plaques of children who have died under the age of 16. There are 19 plaques. And then Peterborough Horticultural Society keeps the gardens, and they have an annual butterfly release ceremony. There's a story that I wrote about. What bereavement does, has done for me, is it's made a link with other bereaved women in this world, and especially in the global South. I lived for 3 years in Jamaica and 3 years in Tanzania. And I mean, maternal mortality of children, child mortality is high. And so there was an immediate link with such women at the grassroots. It's also made me pretty comfortable about death and dying. And since we live in a death-denying culture, I can help in those ways. So then we came to Peterborough because PCVS was hiring. And those were the years where you went to the Royal York Hotel. This is late 60s. Anybody remember? You went to the Royal York Hotel. You had interviews all with high schools, teachers, principals from all over, and you had 3 or 4 offers by the end of the day. So John said, "Oh, Peterborough, it's a night on a river here." Nice. And then he said to the PCVS principal, "Oh, I'm about to have my 3rd child, so what you're offering is not enough." Those were the days where you could deal with your employer too. And so Ken Hosick said, "Oh, I'll try to bump that up. I'll give you something for your CA." Anyway, we moved to Peterborough, and it felt very parochial. We were coming from Montreal. It felt very parochial to us. But you plow in where you're living. And I started to teach at Crestwood, and we went on. But then 5 years here, and John said, there's more to the world than this. This is good. There's more to the world. So we put our applications in with CEDA. Anybody remember CEDA? It was our overseas aid organization. And they were sending grassroots teachers, and Jamaica had asked for an accountant with teaching experience. And I was the dependent spouse. That was the language. So we lived 3 years in Jamaica, and John taught accounting. And Michael Manley was prime minister, and his women's affairs person taught me something about condescension. I wanted to befriend her. So I went with our Royal Commission on the Status of Women report. This is the 70s that had just been published. And I said, "Mrs. Antrobus, oh my gosh, Minister, hold that up." There it is. I went to see Peggy Antrobus. She's the author of a terrific book called The Global Women's Movement. And she stood up, and I said, "Oh, I'm here to help you. And I have this report from Canada." And she got up and she said, "Thank you very much for coming. Actually, there's nothing you can do for us. We're doing consciousness raising in the rural areas, and you don't know the dialect. But I have a little gift for you." And she gave me this pin. It was Equality, Development, and Peace. So I went out of there and I said, "I got to learn from this. And I'd like to try again." And I did. And we're firm friends. And Peggy is in her 85 or so, spends part of a year in Peterborough. And she has spoken at Trent. But she says, I won't speak again because I'm not going to speak to open computers. You know, I imagine a lot of your professors wonder, like, what's going on behind. And anyway, those were the Marg Hobbs days and so on. Now, we said Peterborough is a kindly place and there's room for another NGO. So we started Jamaican Self-Help, 1980. And we knew that we wanted to celebrate Jamaican culture. We didn't want to start with pictures of starving children. That's not global education. You start with, look what this culture has got to teach us. And so we brought Jamaican musical groups and we sold out huge halls and they were billeted, the singers, and they were charming and they were talented. So Jamaican Self-Help got started. And then we started to get matching funds from the Canadian government. So if we raised $1, it was matched. And then, but the office was in our house. So we went on a marriage encounter one time. There was something bothering us. And by the end of the weekend, we concluded that office had to get out of the house. Because people were coming through the kitchen up to the attic, you know. So the next day, John got downtown and rented a place for $350 a month. And then we were able to hire Marisa Kazmarchuk. That was a gift too. She's gone on to the New Canadian Centre. That's where she is now. But Jamaicans loved her, and she just kept all the balls in the air. But then we knew that so there's my book about how Jamaican Self-Help got started. It's called Jamaican Journal, The Story of a Grassroots Canadian Aid Organization. And the group has done a follow-up too. That was 2016. I thought, the archives are at Trent, in the archives for teacher ed and for comparative development, whatever it's called. Now I'm going to stop, take a breath. You don't know where I've landed.
That's great, Rosemary. That's a great spot to pause. And we can maybe some people might have some questions because you covered a lot of amazing territory there. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about when you said Peterborough is parochial, but then you dive in and I thought, yeah, that really sums it up. You kind of, I grew up here and it certainly has changed a lot, but there are still parts of it that are a bit parochial. But I always say Peterborough has a little vibe. There's a vibe to this city that gives it something that is a little, you said it was like a mid-size, and it is, but it's got stuff going on. And I think you're such a beautiful, shining example of that. So I will ask if anyone has any questions while we're on that point. And I said this in the chat, but just for you, Rosemary, James Cullingham does usually come to these talks, and he did one of our first ones in the fall, and he's a member of Gzowski, and we did some of the filming for that refugee work here. So we were involved in some of that early filming, and I'm still working with James on whether we can get one of his subjects back again for another visit with us, possibly on this forum in the spring. So thank you for that. That was great. Does anyone want to ask a question? Sue.
Rosemary, as you're speaking, a lot of the direction of your family is following John's career, which is very normal at that time. But I wonder how you were able to maintain a sense of self and self-confidence and direction in those years when your family was young and the family direction was more led by John.
Yeah. I remember, well, when we were courting, he came from a very patriarchal family. 9 children. And when we were courting, I said, I was using that word. I said, I am a feminist. And he said, I don't know anything about that, but I want to be with you and I want to learn. And boy, I think that of partnerships in general, find out what your partner, if you're attracted to this person, find out what they're really committed to. And when somebody asked me what was his main quality, I think it was loyalty. And a willingness to learn. I think that's the main quality of a meaningful life. The meaning is the ability to change your mind. Or I'm in a book group, Sue, and our book that we're doing is now braiding sweetgrass. Do you know it? Yeah. Apparently, Ms. Kimmerer has Trent links. Apparently, I'm learning.
We talked about it last week, didn't we? In this weird world of Enwayaang, the way we speak together, we keep speaking about things that come and go. But I feel like we talked about that book, or 2 weeks ago with Drew Hayden Taylor.
It was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, we did.
Wow.
It's a beautiful book.
I'm so touched. I mean, her first chapter is about a different creation story. And Sue, this would make environmentalists of us all. The sky woman falling onto the back of the turtle. I don't need to be hung up by Adam and Eve anymore. The dominant Western creation story. So I get a lot of intellectual, emotional, spiritual excitement. But Sue's question was, how do we negotiate? Actually, we spent a lot of time and money in going to communication weekends. And there was a genius in these communication weekends, because it wasn't so much what anybody else said to you. It was you were given questions. What's troubling me about our relationship right now? What do I suggest I do about it? Not you. And I've got a lot of those marriage encounter books that when I'm lonesome, I can reread. So after half an hour of writing, you got back together, changed books silently, read what each other really, and then talked. And what did you cover in the weekend? You covered in-laws, money, sex, children, worries, health, and so on. They were just topics. And what's troubling me about our relationship? What can I do about it? And that, I think that gave my ambition.
Wait and see if we get her back there.
Were considerable. Can't hear?
You froze briefly there.
Gosh. Oh. Well, it must have not been true then.
No, you're back.
Okay.
Those weekends sound like a really good idea. I know all of those of us who are in partnerships are just like, oh gosh, all the same things. Yeah, okay. Let's have a communication weekend. Yeah, that'll be our next thing.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Well, John was willing to go. A lot of men aren't willing. They're not willing, but he was from the beginning. He was really open.
That's great. We have. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions from the chat.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Miriam and then Mitchell. So Miriam asked about Beijing. If you could tell us a bit more about Beijing, maybe.
Oh yeah. Well, here's when I was in Beijing. 1995. I'm just retired from high school teaching, and I think I've got to treat myself. I always did have a strong sense of autonomy, even in partnership. So. And then Linda Slavin, the marvelous Linda, said, oh, there's a UN conference. Who's going from Peterborough? Like, she has this vision And so 5 of us went from Peterborough, and I was on my own on this plane with Argentinian women flying to Beijing. They never stopped talking and they never sat down. Fun. And so there I am I'm writing at this point, a lot of kind of little journalist piece. So I come home and I publish my pieces. Now, in this book, the minister has this book too. Look, she's gonna reach back. I didn't know she's my lovely assistant. Look at Vanna. Yeah. So for the exam, look, we're in Beijing in the mud, and the media center, you go and you write by hand, and you fax to the examiner. And from their point of view, it's a local lady is doing an exotic thing. So they published my stories, and then, but I really believe that the rising of the women is the rising of the race. My experience had taught me that, and my reading. I wasn't personally traumatized. My father was empowering, my brothers, my spouse, my sons. One teaches feminist studies in BC. He said, he's at a high school. He said, nobody else will do it, so I do it. And I just said to them, anything I don't know, I'll ask my mother.
That's great. And it is the reminder that, strong feminists raise good sons, I think. So
yeah,
I think that's important. I'm going to ask Mitchell's question, which was, would you share how you were nominated into the Pathway of Fame?
The Pathway of Fame.
Peterborough.
Oh, yes. Well, Peterborough's not so parochial. That year, I think it was 2011, they were honoring Jamaican self-help because it had lasted 40 years at the same small level. And it's so small that anybody can volunteer. Do you know what I mean? No corporate offices that intimidate you. Just, oh, come on in. Hey, look, clear that chair off and sit down. And we had taken 1,000 youth on awareness trips. And I think that was just being recognized that year, 2011. So John and I, we've got a plaque down at Millennium Park. You could, the grandchildren dust it off, and if there's with 250 others. That was good fun, but I have a sense of humor. The whole ceremony has fusty parts, like you go through an arch. Oh boy, never mind.
It's kind of Peterborough too, I guess, maybe.
yeah, that's right.
Does anyone else want to ask a question? I have Martha asked about the women's conferences at Trent in the early 80s. And if you were a part of some of the early 80s conferences and some Margaret Lawrence talks too, right, Martha, in those years?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Look, you're testing my memory. That's not nice to do at 83. I've always felt that a great power in the world, either for the advancement of women or to slow the advancement of women, are the religions. So I undertook study myself, and my shelves will show. When I go and these books go to the library, everybody will know, well, that's Rosemary's collection, because they are Jewish feminists, Muslim feminists, a book called Buddhism After Patriarchy. And the sisterhood among those scholars is so profound. But since reading Kimmerer, I think that our lead should be with Indigenous women now in the climate crisis. But I mean, my background is sacramental, you know, that's good. Eucharistic sacramentality, that's good too. I'm not throwing out that. Oh, so that lecture at Trent, I was really thrilled to be invited because I've got a lowly BA and I never got more than a B in all my courses. I went to the University of the West Indies to take West Indian literature. I took one course. I read every reference. I got a high upper second. So I can't crack A. So I was thrilled to give this talk, and it was with slides, and it showed other feminist theologians. And this is what the Muslim women had said to me. We cannot reach Islamic women through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We can reach them through the Quran. So we are going to deconstruct the problematic texts, and haven't we all got problematic texts of the Quran? And so everybody else in the field cheers them and wants them to be safe. And the Americans, the well-to-do Americans say, how much money do you need to publish that or to go to a conference? But they're enduringly misogynistic, maybe unreflected, or, I mean, it's a site of struggle for me, the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah.
But I want to be there at the table.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Miriam, do you want to ask about pandemic, about the pandy, or do you want me to ask it?
You were taking question, Melanie. You're doing a great job.
Well, you have so many, but your last one, yeah. What keeps you going in the middle of a plague, Rosemary? That's what Miriam's asking, and I'm sure. I mean, we all find our way through this in different ways. But how are you feeling about the last 8 or 9 months?
Well, bringing down Donald Trump was a lot. No, I'm quite a news junkie. Though I check my sources, I read a lot. I have a good sense of humor, and I have this commitment to write, to think of a topic and an interview and 600 words every week. I have a family Zoom call, 15 people every Sunday. We play games. Oh, here's a game for your family Zoom calls. GeoGuessr. Google Earth puts you in some place, and you're all global on Earth, and collaboratively, you have to figure out where that place is from the road signs. GeoGuessr. Thanks for the question.
That's a good game. I'm also on a family Zoom every Sunday, and we run out of things. So that's a good one. That's a good one. I think a lot of us have Sunday Zooms.
GeoGuessr.
And what about the other side? Oh, sorry, I cut you off there. But what about the other side of the pandemic, Rosemary? Like, what do you think is going to come next for us?
Oh my, I don't think it's going to be going back to normal, because I think we're learning so rapidly. I think it'll be a critique of rampant capitalism. I think we will have valued our relationships more. I think I'd like to give the leadership to so-called minority women and to native wisdom. Now that's blue skying it, I know. I think there'll be a real global vision, and we'll take wisdom from where the wisdom is in facing the challenges.
Mhm. Yeah, I hope so.
I think spirituality will maybe various will come to the fore.
Mhm.
That's pretty vague, but together I think we could tease out more wisdom.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, that's I hope the capitalism thing's an interesting one for me. We've talked about that on this series too, and I'm teaching a course on capitalism and happiness and where that doesn't align.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, it's
I
really,
should be. I want to become an undergrad again.
I'll bring you in. It's great. It's fun. We do readings and think and talk. We just think and talk, and it's a first year course, so it's been really interesting to hear people thinking about really probing what it means to, I mean, what happiness is about, but also it's pretty much it's a critique of capitalism. I'm not going to lie. So it's really not about happiness and capitalism in a good way, and they're all getting that from me. So, any other questions that anyone wants to shoot out there? The sun's in my eye, but I'm trying to see you all.
Yeah. I see red scarves out there on Melanie and on Miriam.
Yep, I'm wearing. I think it actually is one of the Monsef scarves from
originals. The originals.
Yep. I had it. I went skiing.
I think I'm easily made happy, and I'd rather be happy.
Yeah.
And I've experienced a lot of it, the whole range of emotions. That's quite a blessing. And I'll just keep on. I'm going to publish in the next couple of weeks another book because when my columns reach 100, then it's most convenient to put them in a book. And it's called Gleanings.
Great.
And you can't wait for publishers because they say we won't answer you for a year, so you have to self-publish. But Kindle direct publishing, Peggy Ayers gets my stuff ready, and then Kindle publishes for about $6 a copy.
I think I know the answer to this question, Rosemary, but do you ever not have a topic in mind for your weekly column?
Oh gosh. Yeah, that worries me. But then something will come up. For example, I donate to Friends of the CBC because we have to resist all the American toxicity. So we need to support truth-telling news sources with our donations. And so Friends of the CBC is an advocacy group, very intelligently led, and I donate. And now today, this very day, they had a chat that I was on about the odious effects of online bullying. And they had MPs, Charlie Angus, Bob Zimmer, and Ikra Khalid. And then they had some scholars from UBC who tracked how in the last election, the candidates were trolled by such ugly, filthy. I'd love Miriam to talk about dealing with that. And so they discussed how to get control of online toxicity. And there's a story. I just took notes. Daniel Bernard was the host, and the scholars from BC said, this is what we found on the online posts during the last election. It's usually the leaders that attract most, but Catherine McKenna did too, and Elizabeth May did too. It's largely misogynist. 7% is positive of that on of Twitter. Oh, they just, you know what these scholars did? They looked at 1 million Twitter comments. 7% were positive, 40% were, and 30% were highly negative, nasty. In any case, you were just saying about where do you get an idea? I depend on being awake that day and saying, oh, I could do that. But I'm never more than 2 weeks ahead,
Right.
with my ideas.
But you do see,
But you know what, Stephanie, this is an idea right there, this. So I'm gonna phone you, Steph, and see how long it's been going on and what your topics have been. And
that'd be
I
great.
always look forward to talking to you, to you, Rosemary. Really, call me anytime.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we can tell from how many things you're engaged with that you probably don't lack for ideas. That was a trick. That was a sneaky question, because like you're so curious about all the things. I can't actually imagine you running out of a topic. But Dane, you just asked, yeah, is there something you haven't written about that's been sort of eating away at you? And maybe I think actually Dane's looking for like a little intel, a little like early knowledge. So when we read it, we can say, oh yeah, we knew that this one was coming. So, you know, what's coming? He wants to know.
A little teaser.
yeah, oh gosh, Dane, you send me your ideas. But like it has to light a fire in me, you know, people do pitch me ideas. And I politely say, I don't know enough about that. And then I don't say, I'm not interested. But goodness, I think I've written 5 columns about the Pope, 6 columns about Mr. Trump. And I don't know, what are my other favorite topics? Well, honestly, small people doing real things. For example, in this town, there's a group of cyclists. They call themselves tandem bikes. And once a week in the summer season, they bicycle with a blind person. They have a tandem bike. And they take the blind person just to give the person the pleasure of cycling and hearing bird sounds. And now that's a story.
That's great.
I think good news promotes more good news.
And this also ties.
Oh, I've written about Madam Minister a few times. Pardon, Melon?
Oh, I was just thinking that also ties to what other things we've talked about, because last week when we talked to Cam Douglas, which I feel like you wrote about Cam Douglas recently too. But anyway, Cam was here last week talking about outdoor education and the YLS program. And he said the same thing, small things ripple into other things. And so there's no too little that you can do living in this small town in Ontario, which I think is becoming like a nice theme throughout our series. So thanks for that. And Kat, you had a question.
Hi. So I do have a quick question. Just as an upcoming and learning individual, especially as a woman and a feminist, I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions, because you said just now, you said you need something to light your fire. And I'm not suggesting that everyone's going to have the same fire as you do, but I'm wondering how or what advice you can give to young academic females who are trying to find their fire, how to find your fire, and when you do, if you have a general statement and advice on how to maximize your impact within that inspiration.
Yeah, there's a lot of discovery. I don't have a good answer to that, but maybe somebody else does. I think you need some intellectual pleasure in what you're about.
So it has to challenge you, and you want to know more because it inspires you to gain the knowledge.
And maybe you'll need to encounter a little resistance to that point of view. Like, I've always been on the left side of the political spectrum, right from childhood. I used to go to conventions and conference. This was in the riding of Temiskaming. And one of my sons said, "Mother, you're often in an echo chamber with other progressives." So I kind of try to step out of that. And if you're keeping body and soul together, you have enough income, you're not depressed. Who was it said, you're a successful parent if your child is not depressed, suicidal, on drugs, or I forget what the other thing. In other words, be thankful, because these are tougher times than I ever knew, or than the 40-year-olds have known. On my family Zoom calls, I'm looking at the teenage grandchildren and to see how they are. They're studying from home. They're writing exams at home with some kind of a surveillance something. How awful. They don't have their friends. They can't court. If you're keeping yourself going from day to day, this time you're triumphant, my girl.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that.
That's for all of us. That's for all of us. That's for old people too.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that
Tanya, you're full of wisdom. I know you.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Mel?
I think it relates to what you said earlier, that you can have, sort of looking for the blue sky, even as you recognize the difficulties of the world you're in. I think that that's an interesting perspective to think about. You can fight for change and you can recognize the inequality of the world, but you can still have a hopeful heart on some level. And I think that you speak to that as you're speaking. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking, well, you can drive for change and you can recognize the difficulty, but if you're, I don't know, cynical or too pessimistic, it's harder to make that change. So I really like that sort of combination that you have. We probably should wrap up, but I'm just gonna give the floor to you, Rosemary, if there's a little bit more you want to say. And I just want to add, actually, I just read Roxanne's point. Yes, I know what you're saying, Roxanne, and I think I think everyone has their journey, and that as a parent myself, like, ooh, don't give me all the weight of the world on that. And success is a difficult thing to define in that area. But I take your point, Rosemary, that students have journeys and struggles that are sometimes beyond, just things are going to happen in the world, and supporting them through whatever they're going through, which isn't always related to how you are operating as a parent or some weakness in them. It's a complicated world. So thanks, Roxanne, for that. But yes, I am going to give the floor to you, Rosemary, to wrap us up.
Okay. Well, I agree so much with your point about cynicism. I think I'd rather be on the naive side of the spectrum, because cynicism is so hard on the holder of it. And when you look at the travails of the world and the misbehavior of so many and the profile that they have, it's very tempting to be cynical, but you're not bringing yourself any pleasure, and you're certainly not bringing your companions any pleasure. I hang out. In fact, I divest myself of cynical or highly negative people. I just distance myself. So I need all the positive energy, and I try to give it too. And I don't want to be an old lady who curses, you know, the way things are. That's not fair to the next generation. And I genuinely don't feel that way. I read hopeful environmentalists. I read Mark Jacquard of Simon Fraser. And one son told me the other day about I think it's Mark Marshall or something. He says that good environmental news is not getting out there, and so I'm going to follow that down. Now, some of my readers say, "Oh, you're just so Pollyanna." Okay, I'll be on that side. Thanks. You won't have to read me much longer.
Well, I hope we get to read lots more. I hope we get.
And oh, good. And of course, having you people listen to me is it makes this bird all worthwhile.
Lovely.
The looking back and the looking in the head. I take a lot of strength from you. So let's make it mutual.
Love it. That's
it.
That's a great spot to end. Rosemary, you are a delight, and you really, the local comes through in a way that we can be local and global is what I keep thinking about. So I want to thank you deeply for taking the time and joining us. I want to thank everybody on this call for joining us and listening in. And I hope you come back for more Enwayaang. We're taking a break next week, but then we're back and we're just going to keep on trucking. And thanks so much, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rosemary.
Bye, everybody.
Such a treasure. Appreciate you.
Oh, good. Thank you.